This exhibition brings to light the works of Hans Burkhardt, who is a remarkable part of Los Angeles' history. The impetus for presenting this exhibition now is the celebration of the Getty's initiative called Pacific Standard Time. And Burkhardt represents probably the most expansive and remarkable body of work in all of Los Angeles history. History and Los Angeles aren't often words that appear in the same sentence, but what one sees in this exhibition is a body of work that introduced a sensibility in Los Angeles that was virtually unknown. Burkhardt, having spent the better part of 9 years as a studio mate of Arshile Gorky in New York City, came to Los Angeles in 1937, and with him brought a sensibility that introduced the sort of modernism that was taking over New York and had already been championed in the art capitals of Europe. The exhibition presents works from 1937, when Burkhardt first arrives in Los Angeles, and extends through all of the years that he spent in Los Angeles. He died here in 1994, and the exhibition includes his very last painting of 1993. And we see what is so remarkable about Hans Burkhardt is the breadth and extensive range of this artist, who never lost touch with a sort of contemporary culture. The works of the 1940s, for example, were hugely engaged with the notions of anti-war. And Burkhardt has indeed, because of the remarkable body of work that he created in protest of war, has been cited as Goya's spiritual heir. In the 1940s and 50s, art in Los Angeles was very challenged by forces that were so conservative that they deemed abstract artists to be so provocative as to be agents of the Kremlin, the tools of the communists, outrageous, insane sort of comments. Well, during this period, Burkhardt thrives, and in the 1950s had more exhibitions than any artist in Los Angeles, probably in a history in terms of a decade. He had 23 solo exhibitions, including retrospective at the Pasadena Art Museum, which was at that time a very important venue for contemporary art. In the 60s, that continued. He had many, many exhibitions, including a 30-year museum retrospective organized by the Santa Barbara Museum, traveled to San Francisco's Palace of Legion of Honor, came to Los Angeles to the Municipal Art Gallery. So Burkhardt was hugely engaged, and artists were very much inspired by the notions of an artist that could work so freely and so personalistically, and because these were provocative works. The problem with Los Angeles and the notion of history is that we've very seldom documented these types of exhibitions. So documentation is very, very sparse, and one has to work very hard to find it. It exists, these works exist, and this should be a revelation for any scholar, any admirer of art, any artist, and I think this will be one of the great revelations that will come forth from the Getty's initiative, Pacific Standard Time.
I write about art, I organize exhibitions, and I've been almost preoccupied with the history of art in California, at least since I moved here a quarter century ago. One of the figures I found most fascinating has always been Hans Burkhardt, in great part because he seems to be this bridge between New York, the New York of avant-garde of the 30s, and abstract painting or any type of painting in Los Angeles subsequently. Los Angeles isn't a painting town, and of course New York always has been. And the people that Burkhardt hung out with in New York in the 30s, fellow immigrants like Arshile Gorky and Willem de Kooning, were thoroughly devoted to painting, but what they were painting about changed dramatically. Burkhardt allowed himself to become a commentator on the wider real world, whereas Gorky and especially de Kooning were always painting about the wider idealized world. For Burkhardt, it seemed the world could not be idealized until the problems of its reality were at least addressed, if not taken care of, if not cured.
You know, Hans Burkhardt was a very important painter who's been around for a long time. And that should be one of the people that's on the top of the heap. I mean, all the build-up helps the space and makes it even more dimensional than when you look at a de Kooning or something, you know? I don't know, I just think Hans Burkhardt is somebody that should be on the top of the heap.
What's always struck me about Hans Burkhardt is how he takes painting and is continuously pushing it forward to talk about different aspects of both life and death. And these were actually the first paintings, his graffiti series, that I really fell in love with when I was looking through his bodies of work. And he had traveled back to Switzerland and seen that the youth movement, which was AJC, had taken over a building and completely covered it in graffiti. And he took this message to be this beautiful and uplifting experience instead of seeing it as decay. He took it to talk about the beauty of life. He had gone back to visit Switzerland and brought that back here. And this was back in the 80s when very few artists were actually incorporating this kind of work. There was the artist in New York, of course, Herring and Basquiat. But I think just looking around this room, you just see how he's continuously exploring different frontiers of paint with assemblage, obviously with the skulls, and also just continuously looking outward at what's going on in the world through themes of war and then also beauty, the beauty that he sees around him. And so I just have always felt, looking over the course of his career, he really kind of challenges the notion that we have of modernism and postmodernism being these separate ideas, because he's continuously blending together the techniques of modernism. You see his training with Arshile Gorky, working through cubism, surrealism, and then these assemblage techniques, but also challenging the world around him, incorporating a political voice, and I just think that's always been the power of his work, is that he confronts reality through these techniques.
I was incredibly privileged to know Hans well. He was a wonderful friend, one of the sweetest men I have ever known. And that, in spite of the fact that when he felt strongly about things, he was very passionate about it. His politics were fierce, but there was an underlying sweetness to the man. And I think you see both elements in the paintings. You know, there's a kind of vigorous attack on that paint. There's a visceral feeling about the handling of paint, which is rare. I think people now just don't know how to paint this way. I'm sure this exhibition is going to have an enormous impact because people are hungry for really great painting, and this is great painting.
So it's a thrill to be here during the Pacific Standard Time juggernaut that it is, and we always knew that Jack Rutberg would be at the leading edge of bringing one of the iconic artists of that period to the forefront of the Pacific Standard Time.
He's one of the few artists that I can think of. Virtually every painting of his has a story, gives you a feeling of depth that goes right through the work.
The vibrancy of the work is still delivering today, and we're thrilled to be here. So congratulations, Jack.
Hans Burkhardt is probably one of my favorite artists in the entire history of art. I have lived with him for 20 years because of Jack, and I come to all his openings, all his shows. I have all his books. Cal State Northridge did a whole thing on him. This is one of the most exciting shows that I have ever seen anywhere in the world, and I've been all over the world.
Hello, new world. I am from the old world. And this show that I'm seeing today is breathtaking.
He really thought of his art as communicative, and so he wanted to engage people in the dialogue. That's why he addresses pertinent issues like Vietnam and Second World War, where I think he created some of his most amazing work, is his anti-war stuff.
I'm a curator of contemporary art. I've just been following the work. I never knew Hans, but basically the show proves, and it always does, that he did wonderful work from the 1930s all the way through his career, and that is a major achievement.
I wouldn't expect anything less from Jack, but I think he's outdone himself this time. Really collected some beautiful pieces, and what really impresses me the most about Burkhardt, though, is this is a man who really puts the expressionism in abstract expressionism. He really, you can feel his feelings in each piece, whether it's something as fun and graffiti-like as Sex Pistols, or something more serious in nature like his Vietnam pieces.
What strikes me about this show is you really get to see a painter who knows how to paint. And it's very rare these days to see someone who knows how to paint. This show in particular really is kind of like a museum quality show, and you get to see how the pros are separated from the amateurs when you're going out and looking at art today.
We have the privilege of doing a show at Larry's Gallery out at College of the Canyons of Hans Burkhardt's drawings. So this is quite a thrill for us to come and see these paintings.
Like this show, it's work I've never seen before. And some of it I've never seen in catalogs. Of course, perhaps having seen all the catalogs. But it's always a surprise and a wonderful surprise.
This is a great show. I try to go to I've probably been to every Burkhardt show since the 70s, at least since the late 80s maybe, when he had that big skull show, that war show. And I've never seen it, with the exception of that one war painting. I've never seen any of this work before, so I'm just knocked out by it. This is a fabulous exhibition. Exceptional.
This is a marvelous painting. It's my husband's favorite painting, and it's the kind of painting that after you stand here for 5 minutes or so, it's no longer the painting that you looked at when you first got here, that it's changed into something completely different. It's wonderful, it comes alive.
We were children of the 1950s in New York, in the middle of the abstract expressionist thing. We knew absolutely everybody except this man, came out and discovered this man. And the art world changed, everything changed, but we didn't. And we walk in tonight and we come right into this thing that is so much our heart. This is so much the thing that we love so very much. There it is on the wall, and thank you very much because it's been wonderful.
I did have the pleasure of doing a Hans Burkhardt lecture at Cal State Northridge a few years ago, which is sponsored in his honor. And I've always been a fan of his work, always found it really interesting. And this show is an opportunity for those who have not learned about him to see him from early work to later work, all of the work unfolding in beautiful sequence. I mean, this is really a museum quality show, and we don't get enough shows of this kind. A major artist who needs to be better understood by the younger generation, and this is really an opportunity to do that.
What this exhibition hopes to achieve is to reintroduce Angelenos to the remarkable attributes that existed in this city. And I think paramount above all was Hans Burkhardt, who has essentially given us the ability to see the range of an artist whose wellspring of creativity never diminished. Not to his final days did he lack in power and engagement that should be an inspiration for all of us.